Welcome to the LOGSTAT, the Army's premier podcast on all things sustainment, where we analyze new developments, discuss current trends, and forge the path ahead for the next generation of sustainment soldiers. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the LOGSTAT. I'm your host, Captain Garrett Powell. I am so excited to be coming to you today from Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Today, we're going to be coming at you talking about a concept that if you've been in an S4 shop or even in a company line unit and you've had to turn in property, well, you know what a nightmare that can be when trying to get property turned in. Now, we've had some previous episodes when we talked about property turned in, but today we're going to be looking at it from the lens of what happens if you're in a unit and you're deactivating. There's a lot of property to turn in. You thought just inventorying property during a change command ceremony was rough. Think about when you have to turn all that property in. What does that process look like? For those who have went through it, they know the nightmare. So today, we're going to be talking with a unit who's actively going through that right now and what it's been like for them, talking it from their perspective on what they are experiencing right now. Additionally, we're going to be looking at sustainment through the lens of the special operations, because this unit that I'm meeting with, the 3rd Psychological Operations Battalion, is within that realm. So this will be a first opportunity to see what sustainment is like in special operations for those who have never experienced it before. So on that note, with me today, I have two wonderful guests who are going to be walking us through this conversation. I'm going to be having with me Captain Smith and Staff Sergeant Harrison. Give you both a chance to introduce yourself to the audience. So Captain Smith.
Hey, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Captain Douglas Smith, or Doug, as mostly everyone calls me. I started my career back at the Citadel, commissioned about 4 years ago now, or 5 years ago? I think 5 years. Commissioned, went straight to Triple C at Fort Lee, and subsequently went to the 839 Transportation Battalion based out of Camp Darby, Italy. Left there, went to the 82nd, did my time in Black Devils for about a year, and then switched over to White Devils, 2504 in 1st Brigade. Left there, went to Triple C, and I've been in 3rd PSYOP Battalion, as some of you will probably hear instead of psychological, we'll just say PSYOP for this. I've been here since July, and been having a pretty good time so far. My hometown is from Cary, North Carolina, so Fort Bragg is not too far from me, and I am intimately familiar with the state. So,
well, thank you, Doug. And I'll definitely work on getting the terminology better. I know this is a whole new realm for me to make sure I got all those good. Staff Sergeant Harrison?
Afternoon, sir. Sergeant Harrison. I'm honored to be here. It's a great pleasure that you came down to visit us. I was originally born in Columbia, South Carolina. I went to Joint Base Lewis McChord, 2nd Stryker Brigade Combat Team for my first duty station. I was a supply clerk and an S4 clerk in that organization. And then I got the opportunity to join 2nd SFAB Security Force Assistance Brigade as a younger specialist, deployed with them to Afghanistan in 2019, and then transitioned over to the 82nd Airborne Division as the division supply sergeant up there. I was there for almost 2 years, and then moved over to 3rd Brigade to 2505th Parachute Infantry Regiment, where I was the S4 N2IC. Got DA selected, went on the trail as a drill sergeant for 2 years at Fort Lee. Amazing opportunity to learn and grow with the young AIT soldiers, especially with us being quartermasters and developing that next generation of 92s. And then from there, I became the 3rd PSYOP S4 N2IC. Did a little bit of time when I first got here as the Delta Company supply sergeant within this battalion, but since then I've been fortunate enough to be the 3rd PSYOP Battalion S4 N2IC.
Well, thank you both. Excited to have you both on the episode today, and of course, thank you for the opportunity to get a glimpse today into your world and see what sustainment's is like when it comes to the PSYOP. Make sure I'm going to get some terms better.
It's our pleasure.
But I want to thank you both for that. And as before we even get to the whole concept of property, when it's been like to turn all this stuff into for everybody, is for those out there in the sustainment community who haven't been part of special operations or done sustainment in that world, can you just kind of paint that picture for those of what sustainment is like?
So I'll paint it from the officer side, and I'll let Sergeant Harrison speak from the enlisted side more so. From the personnel side and the manning for the officers out there, within our world, there are multiple larger commands, and then within that, the subordinate commands of soft that you can do your KD time in, whether it's a lieutenant as a captain, major. We still have G4 positions. We still have a form of a BSB. We still have a semblance of an FSC right now within other parts of SOF, but then specifically for civil affairs and PSYOPs, like we don't have your typical formation that you see in a mobile brigade combat team now. There are no commands for us loggies over here. There's S4 positions and there's a few other support roles. However, there's a lot of opportunities for growth and professional development here. One thing that I feel like I've really learned from SOF and that I always heard from the grapevine, I think coming down, was that everyone here was a professional and everyone here knew their job, and there's a lot less oversight. And I've definitely seen that in this community where people here are very good at what they do. And it's a lot, just trying to think of a good way to put this. It's not the same as ForceCom or any other regular unit because you have that autonomy that you have. And so you have more resources at your disposal, but you also have a lot more room to make mistakes. And so I think because of that room to make mistakes, you can grow a lot more, especially for us officers, because like as contracts get more valuable, as there's more resources, the resourcing and actual execution of some of these plans jumping over to you is like imperative for us. So I would definitely encourage for any of the listeners out there, if you can find a way to come over here, even for just like a broadening assignment, I would say it's definitely been well worth my time, and I've not even been here for a year.
And you would say there's just a smaller number of sustainers.
Yes. Yeah. So the enabler community within SOF is much smaller than the enabler community within like your mobile brigades or even your typical division headquarters. And we're a pretty small, tight-knit community. And so I think this is something we're going to highlight on later, is the relationships you form within SOF and the people you talk to. And it's not even like, oh, I know a guy that can do this. It's just like, hey, like I'm good friends with this person because it is such a small community and you're able to work so much together.
And from the enlisted side?
Yeah, couldn't agree more with what Captain Smith said, sir. Just to start off, it is an absolute honor to be in an organization like this. I think you definitely, to have success here, you definitely have to be a self-starter and the right kind of person. You have to be autonomous because just like with what Captain Smith highlighted on, there is not a lot of sustainment support. It's like we don't have an FSC in our battalion. We don't even have a BSB for our group. And for those who don't know, our group is essentially our brigade level headquarters. So being able to utilize relationships that we've made from other units that we've been in, because for both of us, this is our first time being in a SOF organization. So I've had a lot of experience with other organizations on Fort Bragg, like the 82nd, and just like Captain Smith said as well, too. We've been able to take advantage of, not really take advantage, but utilize some of the relationships we have to help us get the mission done, whether it's operational type stuff like units going to the field, or when it comes to deactivation with divesting property. That stuff has really played a key part, because if you come here and you're going to expect for someone to do your job for you, it's not going to happen and you're going to fail. Additionally, I think that you have to be able to know what you can accomplish within the box and know what you can accomplish in the gray area right outside of the box. And we, being sustainers within a SOF organization, we have to be masters of everything within the box. When I talk about the box, I'm saying like Army regulation, doctrine, everything that you would typically think of when you're in a normal ForceCom Army unit. But we also have to be masters of that gray area as well, too. So know whenever we can do what we're allowed to do and what our left and right limits are is going to set us up for success. And I think that's how you can be successful coming to an organization like this, especially being enlisted, because compared to other organizations, you might not have the normal, like, hey, this is what you're going to do, and all you got to do is show up, right place, right time, right uniform, and kind of be hand-walked, for lack of a better term, to accomplish the mission. Here, it's like you might just be given, like, a very broad scope of, like, this is what we need to do, and you have to figure it out, whether you're, speaking purely to sustainers here, whether you're a PFC specialist, sergeant, staff sergeant, or even like a younger sergeant first class, you're not going to have someone always looking over your shoulder all the time. You got to be able to make things happen on your own. And I think that's going to be what sets people up for success in organizations like this.
Definitely. I mean, you have no bigger, higher headquarters that you were talking about, no BSB there, no FSC. Like, I don't want to say you're alone and afraid kind of thing, but, you know, you have those smaller groups that you're working with. So does that present a lot of challenges, not having like a quote unquote higher sustainment headquarters, or how does that work for you all?
I think it's different. I wouldn't say it's a challenge. It's just different. It'd be like learning to draw one shape and then being asked to draw something else, like drawing one cartoon and drawing something in a completely different style. So while we may not have our sustainment brigade over us, or we don't have a BSB or FSC, USASOC as a whole does a good way of supplementing units, specifically us, for like R-Struck and for deactivation and for any needs we may have that a typical BSB or sustainment brigade may fill. So like, I mean, for example, if you need to move a Connex or move some large piece of equipment, there's a TMR process that we can still go through, just like much of ForceCom, to get these moved. And then there's also assets available to us within like the USASOC channels, where we can get a box truck, we can get a flatbed, we could get a rental car for the things that we need to fill the gaps that aren't here. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily a challenge. I would just say it's different. And being able to adapt to that differentness as soon as you get here and being able to learn this different language of logistics, I think is really important to success.
Okay. So then can you kind of walk us through like your specific organizational structure then it comes to the PSYOP side?
So for our battalion as a whole, well, I'll start with our group. The 8th Psychological Operations Group has 2 battalions in it, 9th Battalion and 3rd Battalion. We are 3rd Battalion. And within 3rd Battalion, for the R-Struck terms, we have 2 companies that are actually laterally moving over once all these R-Struck changes happen, and then 3 that are going away. And so the split that we've had to kind of balance and find the juggle path with has been supporting our operational companies and then supporting those that are also going away. And so you start reaching a culmination point where how do you support operations with no equipment, or whatever that projected date is for everything's going to be gone or your personnel are going to be gone. And so being able to balance all the things and all the entities, I think it's really important.
Yeah, to add on to that too, it's been very interesting for us too, because we still have units within our battalion that are still conducting operations, whether it's field exercises or they want to do ranges and stuff like that. And we're a battalion headquarters that's deactivating. So essentially, just like Captain Smith said, we want to get rid of everything for the battalion headquarters and the other 2 companies that are deactivating, but we also have to figure out like, hey, like, are we going to start all sharing one Nipper computer up in the S3, or like, how's this going to work? Because we have timelines for whenever we're going to get rid of everything, but we also still have to support the operations that are going on. So it's definitely been a unique challenge for sure.
So how would you say you've balanced and like overcome that challenge of still having to operate and then still turn everything in?
So I would say our bosses have given us really good direction and guidance when it comes to, hey, this is what we're not going to get rid of right now, even though we might have disposition instructions based off of proposed sourcing decisions from the Army's decision support tool. But we could get rid of it. Let's say it's all the laptops and all the monitors that, again, I'll use the example of the S3 or the S1 shop are using. But we're not going to do that now because of the fact that we still have to use those to maintain like a baseline of being operational still as a battalion. So we're getting rid of the stuff that we know we can get rid of because we're not going to be using it anymore. But there's going to be, I'd say probably around like 350 to 400 end items that are not going to be able to be divested by us, even though we do have permission from Big Army to do so now with the PSD instructions, because we're still going to need those until we case the colors later on this year. So
even once you case those colors, you reach that point of, okay, you have people submitting PARs that need to leave the unit. You have personnel actions. You have the functions that still come with being in the Army that we can no longer support as a battalion headquarters. And so the key for commanders out there and for a lot of people listening is finding that critical date, finding that one date where that you are comfortable assuming risk and actually telling your organization, like, there's a time we're going to have to stop doing all this because we have to prioritize something else. And what that looks like in every unit is different. Like for us, it's probably not going to be sometime soon. It's going to be sometime in the future. But we've been on a glide path so far to turn in everything that we can on schedule with what the Army has directed us to do.
Yeah. So you're talking about like case the colors, but hey, we still got some stuff to still do and still work through. It's like, okay, I like how you alluded to, we all going to work off just one computer here.
That's the thing, is those conversations have to be had, and we've had those conversations up to the group level that this laptop needs to stay here, this nipper computer, this single shredder, this printer, these things that you say you need, how badly do you need it? We need to start bunking computers. Like, the computer lab is no more. The each person having their own computer is no longer a thing, and it starts presenting its challenges after a while. But those deliberate conversations need to be had as soon as possible, because this is something I think we'll touch on later, is going into RStruck and going into that 1 year out from that E-date that the Army directs is important to have a plan, and having like a plan that you can violently action and get after is just so imperative.
And I think too, like one of the examples that we can give you for what we just talked about is one of the companies that was on schedule to deactivate earlier than everyone else. They actually already had their deactivation ceremony. Their supply sergeant, Staff Sergeant Salute, he's absolutely phenomenal. He already divested pretty much all of his property book. I think he's well over 90% at this point. For the past few months, he's already been working on a computer in our S4 office because he already turned in his computer. So just stuff like that. Like, we're always going to find ways to make it work, and that's one of the things that you have to be relentless about when it comes to getting rid of everything. So
when it came to deciding what's going to be divested sooner rather than later, and like, was that from you all's team, or how did that conversation go? Like, hey, we need this stuff. Like, how did that happen?
If it was up to me, the S4 and 2IC, we would turn in everything as soon as possible. But obviously that's not feasible, and just being realistic, I'm just an aggressive person. When I hear the bosses say we want to get rid of everything, that's all I'm thinking of. But you have to have like that bigger scope and think of what they're thinking at levels above you. And you have to have buy-in from all parties involved with the unit. So it can't just be a supply sergeant at the company level, or even just a S4 conversation. And they'll drive that conversation, but you're going to have buy-in from like the S1, the S2, the S6, all the entities that are part of other companies that are shutting down, because they will be able to give their feedback as to what they need and why. Because I know, like, for example, like our S2 shop, with us being a soft unit, like, there's certain things that they're still going to need to have until a certain day. And same thing with S3, because we're still conducting operations. So, but to answer your question, sir, if it was up to Sergeant Harrison, we would have everything gone. So,
It's one of those things that's what came first, chicken or egg, because if you get rid of the truck, then how are you going to turn anything else in if you have nothing to move?
Yeah. The chickens will walk with the eggs. That's our mindset, is everyone will walk.
But also going back to some of the relationships and external support that we get and that we're privileged to being a unit within USASOC is the NTV support, because we've already somewhat started the process of getting rid of the JLTVs. They're not gone yet. They're still on our books, but movements have already started happening to take them to certain places to eventually begin that divestiture process for some of our vehicles. And I know some of the other vehicles like LMTVs have already been divested of. So us having NTV support, and when I say NTV, I'm talking non-tactical vehicles. So think of vans, box trucks, everything that looks like a civilian vehicle, it just has government tags on it. And we're super humbled and fortunate enough to be able to have the opportunity to even use those, because without that stuff, I don't know how we would be as far along as we are. Because I will say that I think we're ahead. I think we can agree on that. But that stuff has been, because you're talking 21-foot flat racks, box trucks, and it just makes life so much easier, because then we don't really have to think of it as more of like a, hey, we got to keep the trucks around until everything's gone because we need the trucks to move. We can front load rolling stock because we don't really need it. We're going to use these other vehicles to help us divest of everything else.
So, and getting in more into our conversation of, surviving the nightmare of a deactivation / property turn-in, what has your experience really been like so far?
It's like, for any of you out there that have taken melatonin to try and sleep one time, and you kind of start having some crazy melatonin dreams, it's like that. That's what deactivation is like when you say nightmare. The term that I like to use is operationalizing deactivation, where your CUOPs and FUOPs from your S3, like your entire focus from supporting a battalion, even as an S4, is no longer current operations, and it's what is the most efficient and safest and moral and ethical way possible to turn in all this equipment. And so the Army gives us a goal, say this is your E-date, it's 1 October of whenever, and says turn in all of your equipment, have all your facilities gone, have all your personnel in a PCS status or leaving at that time. And so it's up to us to make that glide path. Living this nightmare, or should I say dream as an S4, honestly, because it keeps us busy, it keeps us focused and locked in. But for these times, the most important thing is surrounding yourself with people that are good people and good workers. I'll let him, I don't want to steal all of his thunder on this, but your 92 Yankees that you have that work under you, you can train an 11 Bravo, you can train a 46 Victor, you can train a 91 Bravo to turn in property. But that 92 Yankee that's been in the supply room for 6 to 10 years is going to know a lot more about property versus someone that just got cross-trained in a hip pocket training for 2 weeks. And so surrounding yourself and your organization with the best minds and the smartest individuals that you can resource is imperative to deactivating, because what Sergeant Harrison and I have been able to accomplish with the 4 or 5 92 Yankees that are under us for this entire battalion, I think is more than some of the brigades that have been trying to deactivate for going on years now on Fort Bragg and across the Army, because we have such good worker bees under us that can take something and run with it. And I think a good term to use is fire and forget weapon systems. Like, those 92 Yankees run with the guidance and they execute violently and turn in this property as fast as humanly possible. And so back to the guys, like, surround yourself with the best people and the best workers, and you'll be surprised by the progress that you're going to make for just R-Struck.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, sir. I think having really strong 92 Yankees and experienced 92 Yankees is imperative when it comes to this kind of stuff. Captain Smith mentioned the 4 or 5 92 Yankees that we've been utilizing and helping us deactivate are the ones that belong to those deactivating companies. And I would say probably the only thing that I could think of that would make it be even more productive, and this is just for future units, my recommendation would be, if you are a battalion or even your entire battalion's deactivating, or it's a few companies just like us, I would recommend that the 92 Yankees for the deactivating companies start to fall under for supervisory authority to the S4 shop. Meaning, like, I become their first line supervisor as the S4 NCOIC, and Captain Smith, for example, would be their senior raider if they're an NCO. So, like, I think that would make it a lot easier, because then you could put all of the 92 Yankees on 1687, which would be the signature card, which is what you're going to utilize to actually conduct property divestiture. Everybody can be on the same signature cards for all 3 UICs deactivating. Example, if it is 3 UICs, maybe it's more, maybe it's less. So you essentially create kind of a 92 Yankee task force, and that still gives guys the opportunities to go TDY, to go to schools, or if somebody has to take leave, or if it's paternity leave or anything like that. You guys are all working together to accomplish the one goal of deactivation. And that kind of goes back to what Sir was saying, Captain Smith, about operationalizing deactivation. So if I was to do this again before it even started, I would say, hey, I want the 92 Yankees to work for me as the S4 NCOIC. Like, I should be able to, like, have complete supervisory authority over them. And that's just going to make your life so much easier, because then everyone's on the same page, and then they're not getting pulled for different things that may come from the companies that they are usually assigned to. That would be a recommendation that I have to any deactivating units in the future out there.
I love that. I think that's a fantastic idea to be able to have a task force like that. I think that'll make anybody's day a lot better if they can be able to have, like you said, that supervisory role over them, because that's the nightmare you get into. And I know we're going to continue to get into this conversation of all the stuff like to turn, all the hundreds of lines of things you have to turn into, and it always going through, making sure all the signature cards are updated. And anybody who's been a commander out there knows how annoying that can be when you have to continuously re-sign signature cards, and, you know, everything has to go to different places. So I think having a task force like that would really help when it comes to, hey, someone is out for a little bit, or just, all centralized, focusing on that same goal. So there's a good way to go about that one. So when it comes to also with the turn-ins, you're going to have the turn into DLAs, you're going to have lateral transfers. What's it been like between those different elements of getting rid of this property through those channels?
You want to speak on ERDs and I'll talk about DLA?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So for those that don't know, typically when you're turning in property through the Army, at least for our branch, is you have multiple alleyways, I'll say, of where it can go if you're standing in a city center. One alleyway is DLA. One is the newly formed, newly renamed ERDS, formerly MDRS. Another is a lateral transfer, and then there's like usually a fourth lateral transfer turn-in type thing that can happen. But for me, I want to focus on DLA. Defense Logistics Agency, whenever you have a proposed sourcing decision going to Defense Logistics Agency, it's actually probably one of the easiest turn-ins you can do for at least a 92 Yankee, because the paperwork is very minimal and a lot of the headache and a lot of the coordination is actually taken care of for you. One thing that we've noticed is, so right now specifically on Fort Bragg Defense Logistics Agency, or DLA, I'll just start saying that, it has a pretty long back of about 2 to 2.5 months for your typical routine appointment. There's a way where our struck units or deactivating units can actually go through leadership at DLA and get an expedited appointment, for those that aren't aware. And until Sergeant Harrison and I learned that, I would say kind of recently, we think it could have definitely sped up the process a little. And if anyone from DLA is listening out there, I would encourage you to put that out to the formations that you serve and that are your customers, because I know that the Army's going through a lot of change right now with TIC and all the new fielding of equipment with 2030, et cetera, et cetera. Make sure your customers know that they can reach out to you for your R-Struck units and coordinate a turn-in separate, because there's been times where we've pulled up with 4 box trucks worth of equipment to DLA for one mass turn-in. And I think that I'll just touch on one thing real quick. You can brief in a meeting on a yellow or a red slide and just say that, this X unit has only turned in 5% of their PSDs, and like one item. But if all their PSDs it's like 10 PSDs, and each of those PSDs has 200 items on it or 200 radio mounts, it's going to look real ugly to anyone looking from the outside that doesn't know what to look for, because they don't just know the process. So there's a time that you reach when you're turning this stuff in where you have to be able to brief your senior leaders on your thought process and why you're turning things in at certain times. Because when you actually are down at DLA turning in this equipment, depending how messed up your paperwork is or how perfect your paperwork is going to impact like how many pieces and how many PSDs you can actually turn in.
So on that, for those out there who have never turned something in, they don't know what a PSD is, can you kind of quickly walk them through the process of, hey, I've been told to turn something into the DLA, like what's that process look like, and like what is even a PSD?
If you are divesting property, whether you're a deactivating unit or not, the Army uses a website called the Decision Support Tool, also known as DST. Don't get it confused with DTS. I know they're very similar, but DST, the Decision Support Tool. I'm not even going to try to sound smarter than I actually am. There's a ton of stuff you can do on that website, but one thing I do know how to do is check to see if my UIC has any PSDs that are losing. So you can actually go on that website, for those out there that don't know, and you can see what your unit is actually gaining. So any PSDs that are going to come to your unit if you're not a deactivating unit. And all that has to do is aligned with your MTO. So leaders at channels way above us, as much as even Army Sustainment Command, are always reevaluating MTOs, and they're looking to see what units should be receiving as fiscal years turnover and what units should be getting rid of. So a PSD, which stands for Proposed Sourcing Decision, is essentially, depending on how much items can be on there can be a lot or there can be a little. It's basically orders from the Department of the Army saying that you will get rid of this equipment, and there's usually a suspense date on there, and the suspense date is you have to get rid of it before that date. You don't want to go delinquent. I know a lot of units out there probably dealt with delinquencies with PSDs. It's just not something good that you want to have because you're kind of just messing up more things in the long run. And then also on the PSD instructions, it'll tell you what the item is, the nomenclature, the NSN, the line item number, and then what condition code that the item has to be in. So most of the time, like what Captain Smith was talking about, when we have PSDs that are going to DLA, it's usually items that are not going to be of benefit to any other gaining UIC out there across the Army. So it'll be like old monitors, laptops, things of that nature. So usually the condition code on those PSDs are pretty much just as is, or like condition code Fox, which pretty much just means that it's scrap, for lack of a better term.
Easiest way to turn something in.
Easiest way to turn something in. But I just encourage all 92 Yankees out there, or anybody who is involved with the proposed sourcing decision process for your organization, whether you're a company XO, an assistant battalion S4, anyone that has anything to do with that process, just make sure that you always read the entire proposed sourcing decision instructions, because you could look at a PSD point blank and be like, oh, it says condition code Bravo on like the main portion of the PSD where it shows the item you're getting rid of. But HQDA will actually put in the notes saying, like on the first sentence of the notes, which is the portion that a lot of people don't like to read, that the equipment's actually going to be turned in as is. So I encourage all units to always read the entire instructions so you know exactly what's going to happen with the equipment. And then also on like usually the last couple pages, it'll tell you which serial numbers it is. So if it is a serialized item, it'll tell you what serial numbers you're actually going to be divesting, and you don't want to mix that up. And I just want to shout out our PBO shop because they do a phenomenal job with making sure that we don't mess ourselves up on the back end. They will always, before they give us a document number or put a document into suspense, which essentially is the PBO's like green light that you can go ahead and get rid of the equipment and that your turn-in documentation is good to go, they're always going to double check the PSDs and just make sure. So it's a really good checks and balance system that we have with our PBO shop. And I just encourage all units out there to make sure that they're maintaining that discipline when it comes to those PSDs.
Okay.
I also do encourage for the commanders out there, know your condition codes, because a condition code Fox versus a Bravo are two very different things. When you're signing for equipment, when you're taking equipment, especially from a deactivating unit, Sergeant Harrison and I can attest to this, that we're running out of funds. We're running out of time and resources to actually repair the equipment, and that's why it's being sent as is. But for the units that are, I would say, less fortunate to be running out of funds and running out of people and they have to bring up their equipment to condition code Bravo or something else, if you start signing for this equipment and it's not actually the condition code it is, you're the one that the onus is going to be on to repair it. Because, I mean, you and I were talking about this earlier, that for the units that are receiving this, if you're receiving this broken down, torn up equipment, it is on you, and it's on your formation and your soldiers that have to put in their time and work to fix this equipment to actually be combat effective. So I would definitely encourage the commanders out there, and we've worked with a few that are extremely strict with regards to actually signing for the correct condition codes and making sure an item is what it should be.
Yeah, I would say I definitely lived through that side of the house where it was, we were receiving, when I was with my second company command, we were receiving a lot of things where a unit was deactivating. And I remember us being like, we don't want that, because one, it was like, oh, we don't even need that stuff. Why are we getting that? So I remember us, always trying to push back. Or as you're talking about the condition code, it's like, I don't want this. This is not what it is. It's broken. Like, I need something. I was supposed to be 1020. Mm-hmm. Like, I need it to be that before I get that piece of equipment. So I remember that was being a nightmare on the receiving end. Like you were saying, Sarn?
So, sir, two things to add on to that. So the first thing is, I would always recommend that if you are a gaining UIC, because even with the two companies that we have that aren't deactivating, I probably get that question at least like bi-weekly of why am I receiving something. I always encourage commanders to either contact their S4 shops and also stay engaged with their PBO offices, because the PBO office and their S4 shops can help paint that picture as to why you're receiving something. Because let's say, for example, you have 12 240 Bravo machine guns in your company, and you already think that that's more than enough based off the personnel you have. And then you just got a PSD coming to your unit to sign for 3 more. I highly encourage that before anybody starts to ask questions as to why I'm receiving it, engage, have those conversations with the logistics subject matter experts in your organization. Because like I mentioned previously, all this stuff has to do with MTOs consistently being evaluated and an ever-changing Army that's always evolving. So you might not need it right now, but it could be something to set your MTO up for fiscal year 27 or fiscal year 28.
So I get on FMS Web and check it out.
Exactly, sir. And another good TTP that I've always liked to use as a supply sergeant, and what I encourage other supply sergeants and company commanders out there to do, if you are receiving a truck or a weapon system or a radio, make sure that, just like Captain Smith said, if the PSD instruction says that I'm supposed to receive and sign for this item for my UIC, and it has to be 1020 condition code Bravo, you have the subject matter experts there to actually verify. Because as an I2 Yankee, I like to preach the total soldier concept and everything, but I don't know everything as much as the 91 Bravo does about rolling stock. I don't know as much as someone who is an armor or maybe even one of those weapon specialist MOSs about weapon systems. So if I have those in my organization or even just in my battalion, and I can just tell them, hey, a week from today, we're going to be signing for 5 Humvees from this unit that's deactivating. Can you guys be there to actually inspect the vehicles and show me what I'm looking at to make sure that I am signing for this equipment in accordance with the PSD instructions? So just like Captain Smith said earlier, you're not going to mess yourselves up on the back end and have to fix something that shouldn't be your responsibility to fix. And I think that's imperative for everybody to understand across the board. Don't just blindly sign for things, just like I'm sure both you guys are tracking, but it's a good TTP to have those SMEs there when you're actually receiving equipment.
Yeah, and that's prime advice right there. You just center a whole conversation day, a lot of it on that. Like if you want to be able to survive a deactivation or proper return, make sure those subject matter experts are there with you. Because like you said, like when you're in the S4 shop, being the Yankees or being the officer, a lot of times like I have no idea what this piece of equipment is that you're asking me to sign for. And then same with the supply sergeant or the company commander. They're not that SME on it, so having those people there is going to pay dividends for you, because they might be trying to, let's say, pull one over on you, but having that expertise, they're like, hey, this actually is not in the condition it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and I think this is a good time to talk about ERDS, because when we divest things to ERDS, what does it stand for again?
Equipment Redistribution and Divestiture Site. I hope that a field grade listening to this, correct me if I'm wrong, please, but I hope I got that right.
So ERDS is the new version of MDRS. I don't know how many people out there remember MDRS. They were around for people to divest equipment to for a little bit. The last time I was at Fort Bragg, and then they went away. And then recently they just brought back ERDS. So in comparison to DLA, which just like Captain Smith said, and I will agree on, and I'm sure most 92 Yankees or sustainment professionals out there listening would agree on, DLA is the easiest route to divest something, because the turn-in packet for that is just one page. It's a 1348. That's all you need. You don't even need a signature card when you go to DLA. ERDS is the 100% by-the-book doctrine way to divest equipment, because you're essentially laterally transferring. I say essentially, you are laterally transferring the equipment from your UIC to ERDS, and ERDS is serving as a middleman to then move that equipment to another operational unit, a unit that's not deactivating. So for example, we might have 40 pro masks that are going from ERDS, or there are 40 pro masks that are going from our unit that's deactivating to ERDS, and then ERDS is going to turn around and take those pro masks and send them to a unit at Fort Campbell, for example. So they are very stingent on those packets, and those packets consist of 1687s, assumption of command orders, 3161s, which is your lateral transfer document with a document number, so it has to have already been processed by the PBO office, the proposed sourcing decision document, so the most updated PSD, the bombs, which is the component listing, completely filled out and signed by the commander. And if it doesn't have a bomb, you have to have a screenshot from the GCSS Army system saying that this end item does not have a bomb that goes with it. And you also have to have the 5098s pulled from G Army and completely signed out. In addition to all of that stuff, you have to have the condition code tags, which I'm sure many sustainment professionals are familiar with, those also have to be filled out properly and signed by the appropriate subject matter expert, whoever did the technical inspection on that equipment. So it is a much more stringent process, but it is the Army by the book way to do a lateral transfer. So that's why I would say that when you have a lot of PSDs going to ERDS, it can be more difficult, but as long as you have, going back to a strong 92 Yankee team, not impossible. And the good thing about ERDS is they can take up to like 600 items at once per appointment. At least the Fort Bragg ERDS does. I'm not sure if they have ERDS at other installations. But if you have all your packets ducks in a row and you have 400 different items that are non-SI, non-sensitive items, you could essentially do all of that in one turn-in appointment. Your biggest legwork is just going to be building all of those packets. And you just have to understand that ERDS does 3 different types of appointments. They do rolling stock, and they do non-SI, and they do SI. So you just have to split your appointments up in those 3 different ways. But going back again to shout out Staff Sergeant Salute and Staff Sergeant Perez, 2 of our phenomenal 92 Yankees in our battalion. They had hundreds of PSDs and over hundreds, probably in like the 300, if not more, item count of end items going to ERDS, and they were able to knock it all out in probably a month or less just by making sure that their packets were squared away. They got great guidance from the ERDS team. They've been extremely helpful, but they're not gonna play ball with those packets. Like you can't try to pull a fast one on ERDS or anything like that. Like you got to make sure your packet is squared away with them. So that's how it's a little bit different from taking stuff to DLA, I would say.
I can imagine like a lot of the hiccups are coming with, you said, the bomb, the 5988s, something wrong with them, or not having the drainage statement for your equipment.
Yeah, you'd be surprised by the amount of things that you can get kicked back for when doing a turn-in. The thing I will say is when you're doing these turn-ins, when you're doing R-struck, you've probably heard of the term, like the only way to eat an elephant is one part at a time. The elephant is deactivation. The only way you're going to dispose of X number of items on your property book is by doing 1 or 2 or 3 at a time. And as much legwork as it's going to take for you as a sustainer and for the audience out there, you need to be having these deliberate meetings with your teams, with those actually doing the turn-ins, and you need to be going down face-to-face to these locations and meeting these people, because I know it gets really easy sometimes to hide behind an email or hide behind a phone call, but you'd be surprised at the difference it makes driving down not even 5 minutes down the road from where we are and talking with the individuals, the contractors working at the ERDS site, or 10 minutes down the road to the DLA site, and getting an understanding versus sending an email and waiting 2 or 3 hours for a response for what could possibly be a misunderstanding. And in order to eat that elephant, you have to have those relationships with those people, and you have to constantly be putting pressure on everyone around you, because the only way you're going to be able to meet your E-date and to deactivate in a good time frame and stay on glide path is if you are as aggressive as possible getting rid of this equipment. You have to relentlessly follow up and make sure people are on top of their A game, because if you are and you hold everyone around you accountable, you're going to reach that point as a battalion where, okay, we're ahead of schedule. Like, this is actually going really well. And there's been organizations that Sergeant Harrison and I have talked to that we've gotten some AAR comments on that have been past their E-date, that have not made their timeline for deactivation. And we're trying to not be like that. And that's why we're being so aggressive and so pushy. And like, I'm sure there's those around us that think we're just living and breathing R-struck. And I'm sure it gets annoying at times, but that's what it takes. And as an S4 shop, you need to do that. Like, this is like your mission. This is your JRTC when not actually going to the field.
Get out of your office if you're in S4.
Mm-hmm.
Like, be involved. Help your 92 Yankees. Make those relationships. The importance of networking and relationships is what has saved us. So, cannot stress that enough. And yeah, help your 92 Yankees. Vet the packets. Help them go to the turn-in appointments with them. I think that, like, we probably actually sit behind our computers maybe like 30% of the time.
I frequently get phone calls from representatives at ERDS, representatives at DLA, because it's something that I've built a relationship with them that they feel comfortable calling me and reaching out directly to me versus just sending a nasty gram and CCing all parties.
I think it's been a theme for a lot of the episodes that I've had is building relationships, and that is going to be your key to success in anything. Today we're talking about property and turning and everything, but take the time, get away from your desk, don't be a desk ranger, and just go out and make those relationships, build those bonds, and that's just going to make your life so much easier if you actually go out and do that. Building those relationships, building those connections, and you actually get to see things, firsthand. Being in the S4 shop, and to our audience out there, if they're, in the S4 shop or maybe a company XO or something, and, going through this process comes a lot with property. It's like, just get out and start getting that hands-on, seeing what you're turning, especially like, I have no idea what this piece of equipment is. Go out and figure it out. Go out and see the equipment, and then it's going to help you so that you can help support those who are actually putting that paperwork together, help them get it done and get the first time go, as they say, through getting this stuff turned in. What are some of the challenges that you've all experienced specifically here within your formation to have the turn-in property during this deactivation?
I think the one that first comes to mind is the initial push that we had to do to get to the point where we are now. Back in October, months ago, when we were starting this deactivation process, a lot of people didn't really know what direction the train was headed. We just knew it had started moving. And so we started getting our feet under us and figuring out, like, okay, we need all the equipment, this X number of line items put in DST so that way we can dispose of them. We need a movement plan for people. We need a facilities movement plan, because right now we're in the middle of this and we have a plan. But prior to a few months ago, when we didn't have this plan, when we were kind of running and gunning, for lack of a better term, there was a lot of meetings where I would say tensions were high because no one really knew the direction that we were heading. And that's where it goes back to that communication aspect, that it's okay to be frustrated and it's okay to not know where you're going. You just need to communicate that to people that, hey, I don't feel like we have a sense of direction right now, and that we are not on glide path whatsoever to deactivate. There's been meetings in the past where him and I have both brought up that, hey, there's not enough PSDs. Like, there's nothing that we can execute right now. We want to deactivate 1 October or 10 October or November or December, or whatever date that is. Like, you need to voice those concerns to people, because after we voice those concerns, we started getting a lot of traction. And it was no fault of those around us. It was just that not everyone had come in a room together and made that concrete plan. And once that happened, like, we've been full steam ahead this entire time. Like, we are excited to turn in this property, to say the least.
Yeah, it took a while to get some of those PSDs, proposed sourcing decisions, actually approved. Because, like, we knew that we had these companies and the battalion headquarters that was going to be deactivating. So we knew everything was going to go, and we knew when it all needed to be gone by. But going back to what I said earlier, you can't really divest equipment if you don't have an approved PSD. It's not legal. So that was a little frustrating, because like Captain Smith said, back in the fall of 2025, we kind of were waiting around a lot, and there was different guidance that was being thrown around for what actually was needed to get some of these PSDs pushed through and approved so we could actually start divesting. But now that we have all of that, it's pretty much like the ball is in our court for the most part, and we're able to get back like after it relentlessly. So the past 3 months has been like really good for us with getting rid of all that stuff. So
say it just took a little bit to get the gears turning, but once they've been turning, they've been going well for you all.
Yeah, and another thing, like we talked about relationships, you're going to reach a point where your gaining UICs maybe aren't as receptive as like maybe you would want for your PSDs going to them or your equipment going to them. Walk down there. Just drive that 20 minutes across post. Drive those 30 minutes away. Like, it's not that hard to go have a conversation with someone and show up on their doorstep with equipment and a proposed sourcing decision saying, hey, I just really need you to sign this real quick, and then just run the other way and don't look back. So if you're reaching, for any of you out there that are having issues getting units to sign for equipment, I would encourage you to go down there and talk to them.
Especially if that footprint is within walking distance, because that's what we told our 92 Yankees to do. And once again, I'll shout out the deactivating company, 92 Yankees. They've been relentless with that process. And we're fortunate enough that a lot of the USASOC internal units that we had PSDs going to, for the most part, were like within walking distance. So they didn't even need vehicle support for that. And they were able to just go down there. And maybe the unit wasn't able to take it right on the spot, but they were like, hey, like, this is awesome. Thanks for reaching out to us. Thanks for coming down here in person. It speaks volumes. Just come back like in a couple of days and we'll knock this out. And that's better than just waiting weeks or months to just have a PSD sitting on DST forever. And everybody's like, because in the eyes of the big bosses, they only see the numbers. So if they're just seeing PSDs sit there and we're all supposed to be deactivating and they just want to get rid of stuff faster, you don't want them to just keep seeing numbers in there. You want to consistently make progress. So
what are some things that you've worked with when it comes to, like, you know, trying to turn this in? I know we've talked before about, I guess, a memo trying to help you with your turn in. Can you walk us through what your specific experience has been like with, you know, the Army working to try and make these processes easier?
Yeah, so ERDS is the Army's effort to make this easier. Instead of going to the mailroom or having to go TDY to another post.
Or ship it to Tobyhanna.
Or literally go anywhere. You can drive to ERDS and give them this equipment with the lateral transfer paperwork, and they are responsible for shipping it to the end customer. However, when the equipment is no longer as is and it has to be to a certain standard and you start adding all this paperwork to that equipment, like, for example, we talked about DLA. You give them the 1348 and the equipment, and it's gone. It's DLA's problem to figure out. Where we've voiced some of our concerns is that going to ERDS and going through this big Army way of turning things in, it has its drawbacks because with such a small and niche organization, our time is money for us. And we're on a clock to deactivate, and you have 192 Yankee in a very large company full of very niche and small equipment that they need a lot of external support to move and transport. So I think that for anyone listening, ERDS is a great concept and it's worked incredible so far. For us as the customers, the amount of paperwork, it just slows the process a little. It's not a bad thing, and I understand. I completely get why we need systems and processes in place, because that's how you keep things legal and how you keep things moving the right way. But if there is any way to just shorten that load on these guys, specifically for our small units, because I know there's a lot of units out there that have operationalized deactivation like we have. However, it's not just the S4 shop focusing on deactivation. It's the S3, the S4, the S1. It's everyone coming together in a room and doing like QOps and FUOps, or when's DLA turn in, when's the next DLA turn in, or the ERDS turn in. For us, with 2 people running it, and for a few 92 Yankees under us, that extra bit of less paperwork would just be incredible. But I truly do understand why it is the way that it is.
Yeah, like we get why ERDS requires all the stuff that they do when we have to divest property through them. But just to add on to what Captain Smith said, it would just make our lives a little bit easier if they kind of made the process simpler, similar to DLA. But we understand, because it is most of the time, if it's not going to Tobyhanna, most of the time it is going to another unit that is going to use the equipment. It's going to be M-towed to them and all that. So yeah, that would just be like the biggest headache and friction point, in my opinion.
Yeah, probably just reduce some of that paperwork.
And people.
I mean, I would say too, like going into the property accountability portion of it. And when I say property accountability, I don't just mean making sure that the items are there. It's getting those subject matter experts involved, like we talked about before, and making sure that not only is the equipment there, but that it is working and that it has all of its BII and COEI, because there's a good chance that that equipment is not just going to go to DLA and it's going to be an easy turn-in. It's probably going to go to another unit. And when you guys even start getting a notion that you might be deactivating, or you do hear officially you are going to deactivate, if you're a unit that's about to go through deactivation, or you think it might happen in the future, I cannot encourage enough to make sure that you start prepping that stuff now, because it's just going to save you more time on the back end. Because once those PSDs start dropping, you don't want to be wasting any time. Hey, I mean, God forbid, I hope nobody says, where is this? But there shouldn't be a lot of where is this? There shouldn't be a lot of what is this? It should be, hey, like, why does it not work and how do we get it fixed? Because there's a good chance it's going to end up going to a gaining UIC and they're going to have to take it 1020. And that's going to save you way more headache in the long run.
Okay, so you've both, been very successful getting through this process when it comes to a unit deactivating and turning this property in, and whatever avenue that you're, it's being told to turn it in. So what can you tell to the systemic community, or really just anybody, doesn't have to be just in the systemic community, on what made you successful so far in this? I know we talk a lot about relationships. Are there any other good key nuggets that you can share with the community?
Violence of action. Ruthlessly and ferociously executing PSDs and following up constantly with those above you and those below you, because the key to success in this business is being the man in the arena and being the one that everyone comes to for their issues and problems, because that's why R-Struck is happening, or that's why R-Struck can't happen for some units, because they don't reach that point of they have so many problems they don't know what to do with, that while in the process they didn't try and solve. And so Sergeant Harrison and I have been on top of that right now, trying to solve all these problems as violently as possible, and I think we've been very successful with that. So my last message, I guess, for that is just do it as hard as you can.
Gotta have follow through. I couldn't agree more with what Captain Smith said, because I think when it comes to being any member on staff, no matter what S shop it is, whether you're deactivating or not deactivating, you have to have follow through. And even before we became a deactivating unit, something I've always tried to live by is I have, within business hours, a 24-hour rule. And if I reach out to somebody and I don't hear anything back, I'm going to reach out to them again. And if I have your phone number or the location of where your office is, I'm just either going to call you or come visit. And that's not in a disrespectful way. It's just because we are trying to be relentless with the processes that we want to be done. And I would also recommend having alternate POCs for different entities too. So like, we work a ton all the time with our group, essentially our brigade S4 shop, and they have a ton of different great leaders up there. They have a whole shop. It's not just like how Captain Smith and I were, it's just us two. They have a lot of great leaders that work up there, and they've been extremely helpful. So usually having that follow through, and if the person that you usually go to follow up with whatever you're trying to get done isn't available or isn't answering, having another person that is just as good to get that stuff done for you. It's going to make the process a lot faster. You can't just sit back and be like, hey, here's 300 PSDs for headquarters company that you guys got to action. Like, good luck. Let us know if you need anything. You have to be relentless, and you got to be helping them with every step. And it's not saying that anybody is not competent enough to handle it. Like we've mentioned before, we have phenomenal 92 Yankees and members in our organization, not just sustainment, but like everyone in our organization has been really involved with this process. But you have to have ownership. And I was going to talk about that a little bit more at the end too, but you gotta own this, really.
Yeah, our group commander has a great way of describing it. It's more faster. No matter how many PSDs you execute, no matter what tasks you accomplish, more faster. And that's the attitude you need to have.
Okay. So is there anything that we missed today that you wanted to highlight when it comes to, deactivation, sustainment, and, special operations, or just anything a property turn in?
Honestly, I think for the units within USASOC, which I don't think there's any of you out there, but for the other units going through deactivation, I encourage you to do a site visit to a unit that is currently deactivating. That's something that I did within the first 15 days, I think, of getting into this position, knowing that we were going to deactivate, is I went down to an organization on Fort Bragg that was already 1 year ahead of us in R-Struck, and I asked them for a lessons learned. And 3 hours later, I walked out of that building knowing a lot more about R-Struct than I would have otherwise. And some of those lessons that even talking to junior PFCs all the way up to a major about R-Struct that I learned from them, I'm still using and remembering to this day, because the Army may be black and white in a lot of areas, but R-Struct as a whole falls within the lines no matter what unit you're in of deactivation.
Yep. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel every single time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we so often get lost in, is like trying to reinvent processes and try to redo things where we've done this already. Just pull it off the shelf. Go, as you said, go talk to somebody who just went through it or who's going through it.
At the end of the day, it all goes to DLA or ERDS or another unit. So however you get it there, however you skin the cat, I mean, that's up to you, but do it as fast as possible.
Utilize your resources. Mm-hmm. That's what I can say. Utilize your resources.
So on that, as we kind of wrap up our conversation today, I always, give my guests an opportunity to, give some of that good advice, some wisdom from your years of experience. So what would you say is some good advice for the systemic community? And sorry, you first, Doug.
For the systemic community as a whole, be a steward of the profession. Love what you do, love the people around you, and love the life that you have. We are, both Sergeant Harrison and I are extremely grateful to be in the position that we are and the opportunities that we've been afforded so far in the military. And I think that we have a lot to be grateful for. So tell someone thank you and just try harder, work faster, and make a difference, because even though you may be doing something so small like having a conversation with someone or turning in this one item of equipment, that one item of equipment could be making the difference for a soldier's life at JRTC or downrange. So do what you can to support the warfighter and have fun doing it.
Sir, I would just say that for the sustainment community, definitely make sure that you remember your lethality and go and do things that are going to make you more lethal overall. And that's just not just talking about going to the range or getting your expert soldier badge, stuff like that. That stuff is important, and I encourage everyone to do that, but be a lethal sustainer. Make sure that your PT is solid, and if you're injured or you're hurt, do whatever you can to get back into the fight, and make sure that you're always staying updated with the most appropriate resources. Like I said, you got to own the inside of that box before you can even begin to focus on the gray area. And then that kind of leads into ownership too. Just like with what Captain Smith was saying, take pride in what you do. I have professional anxiety every day. That's because when my alarm clock goes off, I'm extremely excited to come to work and to deactivate the battalion, because that is our mission right now. And I also get to work along some of the best sustainment professionals and even just people in general that I've ever worked with in my career. So be excited about what you're doing. Take pride in that and own it. Like this, if you own what you are doing, you're not going to fail, because you're going to have immense source of pride with what product that you're putting out. And then I would also say to lead and mentor your subordinates with purpose. Being a 92 Yankee myself, I think that there's lots of opportunity that gets missed with mentoring junior sustainers or junior 92 Yankees, and you need to know what their goals are so you can help steer them in the right direction. And also people's goals change all the time too. You might have somebody who says that they want to be a commissioned officer one day, and then the next day they change their mind and they want to be a warrant officer. But always be that lighthouse, if you will, for them, so they can lean back on. And even if you don't know, like you've never done the process for what they're trying to accomplish in their career yourselves, like you should want to lead and mentor with purpose so that these juniors can one day be better than you are, because that's the whole purpose of leadership at the end of the day. And lastly, I just want to I just want to shout out all of the deactivating 92 Yankees for the deactivating companies. That would be Staff Sergeant Touloud, Staff Sergeant Perez, Sergeant Washington, and Sergeant Bisciano. Without them, we would be nowhere near where we are today. And they essentially carry Captain Smith and I on their backs every single day. So we cannot be where we are without their hard work. So I really appreciate them and everything that they've done for the organization.
Well, thank you very much, because I know how much, it means to, those who are out there on the front lines, out there because they're the ones going through this. We talked about all this paperwork. They're the ones spending all those hours
in the trenches,
putting that all together. And I know a lot of times it's in the Yankee world, it can be a thankless job because of, people are always doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes, keeping that unit, no matter what type of unit it is, supplied in so many different aspects. So just always appreciate the 92 Yankee world and everything that they do. And especially for me, because I love property. So I've always enjoyed when it comes to property accountability and just organization and stuff like that. But we had a great conversation today. We talked, a lot when it comes to just getting through the process of what it's like to deactivate a unit, turning in property, getting a little insights into the sustainment side of the house for special operations. So I know there's going to be a lot of questions out there. As we talked about today, it's about building relationships, networking, and reaching out to somebody who's been through this. So for anyone listening out there, where can they find you to be able to reach out to you, be like, hey, heard you on the podcast. We're about to go through this. Help us. So I'll start with you, Doug.
I'm number 98 on Global. My middle name is starts with a D as in Delta. I would also encourage that for those parties on Fort Bragg, come visit me. Come visit our office. We would love to have a conversation with you and dive much further in depth than this podcast was able to, because you're only as good as those. You want to be better than those that came before you. And like Sergeant Harrison said, I want the next unit that deactivates to do it better and more ruthlessly than we did.
Yeah, we welcome anybody that wants to stop by. I'm the only Staff Sergeant Andrew Harrison in the Army. You can find me on Global. Super responsive for email and Teams. But just like Captain Smith said, we welcome anybody coming by. We can talk on the phone. If you hit us up via email, we'll give you our phone numbers. We just want to spread the knowledge and the guidance that we have, so people can be even more successful than us in the future.
Well, thank you both for coming on today. I just want to really appreciate your wisdom, your knowledge. But once again, thank you both very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, sir. It was a pleasure.
So for everyone out there, I know we had a great conversation today. We got into a lot, and as I alluded to, there's so much more to talk about. And I know this has been a longer conversation today, but reach out to those who have just went through a deactivation, those who are reach out to our guests today, or just anybody in the United 2 Yankee world. Reach out to your PBO officer. There's a lot more to this conversation. We barely scratched the surface when it comes to a unit deactivating and just the different avenues when it comes to property turning. So I know there's a lot more to continue this conversation, but that's the whole part of why we're doing this podcast, is starting that conversation, building those relationships, building those connections, so those out there can start to think about, okay, what is it going to be like this when if I go through something like this? And this is not restricted to the sustainment community. This is anybody. Like you see today, we're talking right now with a psychological unit, what their experience was like. So I leave you with this today. Get out there, build relationships with those units to your left and your right. And if you're going through a deactivation, or you have or just a standard, you've been directed to turn something in, reach out to those who have gone through it. Stay connected with your 92 Yankees and your PBO officer. But that is all we have today, folks. As always, sustainment leaders start here. See you next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of the LOGSTAT. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Please share this episode across your formation and leave us a review. If you have a topic you'd like to hear discussed, then please reach out to us at armysustainment@army.mil or directly to me on Global at garrett.h.powell. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the U.S. Army CASCOM page. We'll see you next time. Sustainment leaders, start here.